Friends, I'm sorry I can't speak in Hindi, but I came here to recharge my batteries. This is a wonderful struggle. It takes me back to my student days in the US when I was doing my PhD at Madison. I went from India as an engineer with zero politics. Good student, good marks, nothing about the world. And I went to a university in the US where the students were demanding to know in '69 why the US was bombing Hanoi when the Vietnamese were not bombing New York. That was my first education. My IIT training didn't teach me to ask this question. IIT training taught me to answer questions, but never to ask them. And that is why JNU is different from IITs. See, it's important to understand this. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. I came from Chennai all the way. I got up at 3:45, took a morning flight, and came here just to sense the spirit of spring, spirit of struggle that you embody. And somebody here said that, foreign university scholars are supporting us, but what about Indian scholars? Well, I'm here. I taught at the university for 40 years. I continue to teach, and my heart is with JNU now. We are all JNU now, and nobody can take that away from us. And I've seen the kind of tolerance you show. Even today, I'm seeing the kind of tolerance you're showing. Very commendable. But let our enemies not mistake us. Tolerance is one thing, struggle is another. We're not going to just lay down and be run over. And let's ask, what are we fighting for? To me as I'm now 68, and I feel very young among you. And I feel that I've really got lots of energy and lots of time to go to keep the fight going. And after all, what is life about? If you can't fight for certain ideals, you can live, you can eat, you can sleep, you can have children, you can be a father, mother, what the hell? At the end of it, there's something you have to live for. And the moment, why are you all here after a whole day of classes? You wouldn't normally be here. But now you have changed from what you were 3-4 weeks ago. You have gone beyond yourself. And that is the first step to social transformation. We can go beyond ourselves, we can change society. I really admire your courage, admire your balance, composure. People talk about why are we not getting support from other parts of the country. Don't forget, you have experience with the media here directly, how they doctor videos, how they tell lies, and how they don't show the real face of the struggle. Same thing all over the country. So you won't find our struggles in your defense come in the print media or in television. But I can tell you, across Tamil Nadu, I bring you solidarity from the people of Tamil Nadu, from the working people of Tamil Nadu, from the democratic movement of Tamil Nadu, from the academics of Tamil Nadu, from the students of Tamil Nadu. So don't imagine for a moment that the rest of the country isn't watching you. The media aren't showing us. We are watching you. We are learning from you. And we will make this a country-wide movement, let me tell you. Because it's not just a JNU issue. It's not just a JNU issue. Please understand. You see, I'm an economist by profession, okay? I teach economics, but I teach economics not in Sanskrit, but in a language people can understand. And what is this economics about? You have a country where out of 130 crore people, $100 billionaires have an amount of wealth, each exceeding 7,000 crore rupees. The total wealth of these 100 guys is almost a quarter of your GDP. And this is a country which has no wealth tax. Just digest that. A country where wealth is hugely, obscenely concentrated in the hands of a few, does not have a wealth tax. The wealth tax was abolished last year by our finance minister. What is the logic? Can't collect it. But a poor farmer in Tanjavur didn't pay one installment of his loan on a tractor. They didn't say we can't collect the dues from the fellow. They took him to the police station, beat him up, and took the tractor away. Whereas Malia was on a flight. He was in flight mode, so they couldn't reach him on a mobile. Just like our Prime Minister often is. So it's a different matter altogether. Now, you see, maybe I'm anti-national, I don't mind. I'm perfectly happy to be anti-national. You see, what is happening to us? What is happening to this country? I was born just after independence, okay? And we grew up in a milieu when for India was trying to build a relatively autonomous path of development. It was capitalist development, all right, but it was some attempt to bring a relatively autonomous path. Some idea of self-reliance, some idea of building our own public sector institutions, all the rest of it. And many of us dreamed of going and working in a public sector company after graduation. Today, is that the ethos? So what's happened? We are now in a neoliberal regime where the mass of the people do not matter. We have passed a National Food Security Act 2 years ago, 2013, November. It is yet to be implemented in this country. Has anybody thought about it? That you have passed a National Food Security Act, result of a struggle of many movements, of civil society organizations, of left parties and so on, but it's not implemented. Does any media ask the question, why is the National Food Security Act not being implemented? Do we ask normally? Today we will ask, because we are here. Today we have come to the stage of asking questions, and if we don't find answers, we will transform this society so that we get the answers that people deserve, and not a place where people have to beg for a living. Friends, it is not just neoliberal policies. These policies are sold in all kinds of nice ways, and I'm sure there are, people who study economics who think they are very good policies. We can discuss that. We are open to discussion. After all, we are open to discussion even with those who normally don't believe in discussion. So it's not a problem for us. But today we face not only the attack of neoliberal policies. For the last 25 years, I saw that Sainath was here speaking to you. My very dear friend, one of my inspirations, Comrade Prabhat Patnaik was here, he was speaking to you. Utsav was here, so all of them are here. I know that you have heard a lot of economics. Chaiti was here, so perhaps you don't want to hear more economics from me. So I'll keep the economics minimal. But some basic aspects of what is happening in our society because of the particular political economy of the society need to be reiterated and reinforced again and again. We had 25 years of liberalization. Over this period, they tell us that, in the economist language, they tell us that the trend rate of growth of the Indian economy, I'll translate this into proper language data. Trend rate of growth of the Indian economy from 1981 to 2014 is 6.1% per year annual compound rate of growth. Sounds very good, 6% rate of growth. But how come we've had about 300,000 farmers commit suicide? And when the farmers committed suicide, did the finance ministers rush down to take care of them? But when the stock market, please watch the television channels, when the Sensex falls by 100 points, 200 points, they talk about a bloodbath. When workers in Maruti get dismissed and commit suicide because they can't find a living, nobody talks about a bloodbath. When farmers commit suicide, nobody's talking about a bloodbath. So who is this country for? Ask that question. Who is this country for? Is it not for working people? If you take the government of India and all the state governments and take the total tax revenues they collect, 65% of the tax revenue comes from indirect taxes, taxes that the ordinary people pay when they buy a matchbox, when they buy a piece of cloth, when they eat in a restaurant. It is ordinary people who are funding this country's development expenditure. So when some corporate honcho comes and says, oh, you're all paying tax, you're all using taxpayers' money in JNU, go and study, don't do anything else. Let us remind him that he is not the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the ordinary agricultural laborer, the rickshaw puller, the ordinary farmer. They're all taxpayers and they pay the bulk of the tax in this country, not these guys, not these honchos. Taxpayer is not a suited and coated fellow. So suit boot wale to alag karte hain. We know who taxpayers are, and that's ordinary working people in this country. And so when they demand the right to health, when they demand the right to education, they are not begging. It is please understand, they produce the wealth of this country, they get a small part back as wages, and they pay the taxes on top of it. So people who produce the wealth of the country and pay taxes are entitled to health, entitled to education. These are rights, not somebody's benevolent grant to us. These are rights to the people. Likewise, you folks have a right to education, education of your choice, with all the debates that we have been having here. It's wonderful to have JNU in our midst, and the country would be very poor without JNU. In fact, we need not one JNU, but 1,000 JNUs in this country. And let me tell you, as long as we guys are around, people like me and Professor Satish and so on, we will continue to fight for 1,000 JNUs in this country. We will not allow anybody to shut down this progressive, path of education. Now, on top of that, on top of neoliberal miseries, we now have a regime which is stoking 1,000 communal fires to divert us while they go on the ultra-neoliberal path. They are racing with the ultra-neoliberal policies. Please take a look at the economic survey, those of you who have done some economics. It's all about cash transfers. It's all about JAM. Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile. This is the line. Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile will solve all the problems in this country. Now, while they are doing this, while they're going ahead, somebody said anti-national, right, about us. There are people who are selling the country's assets to foreign capital very quickly. And they wanted to sell about 68,000 crores last year. They couldn't manage it. They managed about 28,000 crores or 25,000 crores. This year they plan to sell 56,000 crores more of public sector assets. Who's going to buy it? You, me? Very likely foreign capital will buy it. This is privatization in a double sense. It is both privatization and denationalization. The property, the assets go to global capital, global finance capital. And they are calling us anti-national. People who preside over an economy where the assets of the people, don't forget these are people's assets, not the government's assets. The assets of the people are being sold to global capital. And I think that we have every right to question these choices. And to question those choices is not anti-national. It is perfectly patriotic on our part to question those choices. Not that we need a certificate on patriotism from any of these fellows. And that's different matter altogether. But the other danger, as I said, is now these fires being stoked everywhere. And I think it is especially in that context that I think you have reacted very maturely, very soberly, and very courageously. So easy to get caught in their game and start paying them back in their own coin. You have not done that. Not even today, when there is ample reason for you to get annoyed at the noise interference with our meeting. You have not done that. And that means that you are showing a maturity far beyond what, the so-called wise men in the media associated with youth. I think you've just shown them a thing or two. You have inspired people like me a lot over the last 3 weeks. We've been watching you, and we know it is difficult to sustain a struggle for a very long time. We have no illusion. It is difficult. But it's amazing how you sustained it, Like I said, when I was in the US, as a completely non-political student, and I watched the students go down the road and say, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, NLF is gonna win. This was the slogan. The slogan was, I didn't, poor me from IIT Madras, I didn't know who Ho Chi Minh was, right? Pathetic. Pathetic. That started my education, and it was a wonderful education, which is why I'm here. I'm here because this is the place to be. And that's why it's okay if I have to get up at 3 in the morning and go back at 11 in the night. Doesn't matter. It's just lovely to be here and lovely to be with all of you. I know you're all, you got a long day, or both things come. But don't ever let anybody, with all their clever words, sunder this wonderful unity you have built. Today you have built a unity which goes across political differences. The people have different political views. I have one view on the economy. My dear comrade here may have a different view on the economy. It doesn't matter. We are together. We are together to fight what we see as the onslaught of communal fascism. One can quibble about words. Maybe fascism hasn't quite arrived yet. Maybe it's on the way. Maybe it's arriving. Or whatever. I'm not too bothered about that. What I'm impressed the most with all of you and with your leader, Comrade Kannaiah Kumar, and all the other comrades, Omar Khalid, everybody, it's invidious to mention individual names, all of your comrades in the JNUSU, the way they have stood up to pressure, intimidation by the media, trial by the media, the way you stood up to it and managed to mobilize a large part of the student population. Across political views, across barriers of various markers of identity. I think we are seeing the dawn of a new politics in this country which can combine issues of social oppression and economic exploitation and take forward the struggle for the liberation of our people. And that is what I suppose Kanyakumar meant by Azadi. Liberation from exploitation, liberation from caste oppression, and liberation from a regime that wants to sell the country. So, I know you have many more people to listen to, speakers to come, but I come from Tamil Nadu, where, as Mangai would have already let you know, there's a very strong tradition of Tamil nationality and consciousness. In fact, many of us regard India, this may be heresy now, as a multinational state, where people of different linguistic nationalities live together. We don't say that, they should all go away. No, we'd love to have this wonderfully diverse country. I mean, after the collapse of the USSR, can you imagine any country in the world which has this kind of diversity, this kind of wonderful, range of languages, cultures? This is amazing, and I can't imagine why some people want to have one language, one religion, and one whatever. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I celebrate this plurality that we have in this place, but we do want this wonderfully plural and diverse nation also to be a nation where democracy thrives, not just in the electoral sense, but also in the sense that Ambedkar talked about. That, you can have today one man, one vote, but we don't have economic equality, and we don't have social equality, and as long as that doesn't happen, society will not stabilize. Now, people have talked about Dr. Ambedkar. I did a long essay on Dr. Ambedkar, and I was doing some research for that. He speaks in the Maharashtra Council on agriculture. And he's talking about a problem that is so current today. He's saying, look at all these smallholders. Is the smallness of holding a problem? Should we just, kind of get them off the land and give it to the corporates in today's language? And Ambedkar is saying, no, the smallness of the land holding is not a problem. You can provide inputs, you can provide support from the state, and you can give the farmers the power of scale by getting them to unite and work the lands collectively. This is a very, very advanced proposition made way back in 1927. Many people don't know this part of Ambedkar, where he looked at the economy and in fact argued very strongly. He even said we should nationalize land and lease it to collectives of farmers. That is what Ambedkar said. So, people don't read this Ambedkar, some of them read selectively. He spoke elsewhere. He talked about this whole issue of, libertarian philosophy and laissez-faire. Let the market decide, don't interfere. He said, yes, it is true that if you have laissez-faire, you have liberty. But liberty for whom? This is his quotation, I'm just quoting him to the best of my memory. Liberty for whom? Liberty for the capitalist to exploit the worker. These are not my words, these are Ambedkar's words. Ambedkar had a vision of a society, a just society, there is a lot in common with the vision of many of us who are fighting for a more progressive social order. And today, while we can fight for that progressive social order, we must first defend what we've got. And that what we have got through our freedom struggle, through the struggles of our working people, through all of our struggles today, is under threat both from communal fascism and from corporate Hindutva. And this is a fight, in my view, we've all been wondering, I've been in public life, active political life for 40 years, and we don't have all the answers. I mean, we're honest to say we don't have the answers. In fact, looking at JNU's movement, I believe that this movement in JNU could very well be a turning point in the struggle for a better society. And I think you as flag bearers of this wonderful movement, which can potentially, always potentially, we need to keep our unity going, we need to learn as we go along. I'm not here to offer you any advice, I'm here to learn from you and to recharge my batteries from you, as I said in the beginning. Thank you for recharging my batteries, and don't forget that in the coming days, wherever I may be, I'm with you. Thank you.